within the LGBTIQ community, and words cannot begin to express how myself, Caleb, and everyone feels about this day. I am Simone Hill, President of United Belize Advocacy Movement, and we are about to commence this afternoon's press conference. Seated at the head table are representatives of the legal team. To my left, we have Senior Counsel Lisa Schumann of Belize, and to my right, Senior Counsel Westman James of Trinidad and Tobago. Also, we have Caleb Orozco, Executive Director of UNIBAM and litigant in the Orozco versus Attorney General case, challenging Section 53. And last but not least, let me also mention his sister and greatest defender, Golda Orozco, who has been by Caleb's side throughout the case. I will now be joined by my colleagues so that we can commence this press conference. After we have made our presentations, or they have made their presentations, questions will be fielded from the media. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would just like to indicate what occurred today so that for everyone here as well. So in an oral decision today, Chief Justice Mr. Kenneth Benjamin ruled that Section 53 of the Criminal Code of Belize is inconsistent with the Constitution of Belize. His decision, which as we've seen has been applauded by LGBT organizations and the human rights community in Belize, outside the court as well as outside the region. Now this case started in July 2010, where Caleb brought the case as he was then the executive director of UNIBAM to challenge Section 53. There have been also interested parties which have joined the case. Now today, the court held in its groundbreaking decision that, first of all, that Caleb had legal standing to bring this case before the courts. Furthermore, that the court has the right to review legislation and strike down where it's appropriate to do so, or modify it where it's appropriate to do so. And then he found that Caleb's right to human dignity, privacy, equality before the law, equal protection of the law, and freedom of expression were breached. The court then read down the legislation to exclude consensual same-sex intimacy in private. I think the court went to pains to say that it did not include sexual contact with minors, and it does not include sexual contact with animals. They are not the same. I just would like to read a statement by Senior Counsel Christopher Hammersmith, who, along with Ms. Schumann, led the legal team for Caleb, and he had said, "Good law always reflects common sense, and common sense has prevailed in Belize. The inherent dignity of each and every human being, regardless of sexual orientation, was recognized. Today's decision shines a powerful light to guide us along the path and we must take towards a more just, tolerant, and inclusive Caribbean." He expresses his gratitude. Other persons have chimed in and argued and said, like Laura Tucker Longsworth, the chairperson of the National AIDS Commission of Belize, that is Section 53 as a national issue is a national issue. It has its implications for HIV prevention and care. Education is key for creating meaningful change in our society. And that was one of the points that the Chief Justice made in his decision, in which he highlighted that the law was not necessary for public health, and the law was not necessary for public morality. So we are pleased to have had the decision by the court in the way in which it did. It held on all grounds for the claimants, and everyone, certainly on the legal team and otherwise, have been very pleased. The news has gone all across the region, and many have called us with congratulations and expressed their delight and moving forward human rights in Belize as well as in Trinidad. Now I will give the opportunity to Caleb to say a few words, and then Ms. Sherman, and we can take some questions.
One of the things I learned personally is that no social movement ever exists in a vacuum. And the front line of people who start social movement is the people like me, or rather, the front line, the people on the front line who sustain social movements are not people like me. The people who sustain social movements are people like my sister and my mom, who were there for me when I had nothing, who provided support when there was none, who screamed, yelled, and hollered when they had to, and who was unequivocal in the support of providing a system of support that the state refused to provide for over 2 decades towards me as an individual. I cannot say enough that in this country, where women are questioned for their leadership at cabinet level, straight down to various parts of society, I cannot say enough that we have to stop undervaluing the contribution of women in this country, because they are the invisible hand that transform the way we look at our society or at our society. With that said, for me and to my community, this document called the Constitution is not toilet paper. It is real, full of ideals, and it is our responsibility to demand its enforcement, to demand the ideals that exist in this document. Today, the court acknowledged what I had suspected for decades. But what you realize in any social movement is that the people who feel the pain or who feel marginalized or who carry fear must step up and defend those ideals, otherwise nobody else will do it for you. I personally have sacrificed, despite violence, intimidation, threats, and constant security issues, to stay the course to ensure that we completed this case. Not so much that I will benefit from the decision, but for the next generation who must be free, and to give state system a chance to take their fiduciary responsibility serious and stop excluding us from protection that we have as citizens, which are common aspirations to all citizens. Today, that sacrifice was worth every bit of effort, and for me, I hold no regrets what has happened in the past.
I'll be brief because I'm sure you have a lot of questions. In 2009, when I met this audacious character sitting next to me, he asked me if I was willing to challenge the criminal code, and immediately I told him yes. Why? Because I remember a time when the criminal code actually said that a woman gave her consent at marriage to sexual relations and could not revoke that consent under any circumstance, even if she was brutalized. The front line for me has always been human rights, whether it is of women, where I started out, whether it is of the status of children, whether it is of indigenous people and this frontier, the rights of LGBT citizens. None of us are free until all of us are free. And make no mistake about it, the ruling today was just the first step. It continues, the struggle continues. All of us have to be in a position of being able to enjoy our rights, whether it be Belizeans with incapacities or whether it be transgendered Belizeans. The day will come when all of us can say we enjoy equality under the law. That day is not today, but today we have made a giant leap forward. I want to thank all of my co-counsel, Westman James, Chris Hammersmith, who would have loved to have been here, Simeon Sampson, Senior Counsel, who wanted to be here, and also Godfrey Smith, Senior Counsel, who represented the interesting parties, along with Lord Peter Goldsmith. A lot of hard work and effort went into this, and also from all the legal team at UWI, Professor Tracy Robinson, Professor Arif Volkan, so many others, law students who helped us in the research and the work. What happens today is, the face of it is Caleb Orozco, but there are so many other people that we have to thank for all the work that was put in, all the organizations that are represented here today. We couldn't have done it without you. And so for me, this has been a signal honor and a pleasure. I want to acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Dolores Valderramos Garcia, who not only gave me invaluable support, but was the first person to recognize as special envoy that the rights of Belizeans living with AIDS had to be taken care of. So thank you all. I'm really grateful to everyone for being here.
Now we will take some questions.
I think Simone wanted to say something. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
If anyone has any questions?
Senior Counsel, Aaron Humes, Belize Media Group, congratulations. I know you've been waiting a long time for this. We all have. One of the things that immediately jumped out in terms of the amendment, the proposed amendment by the Chief Justice.
No, it's not a proposed amendment. It's an actual change. The law has changed. It's not
Okay.
proposed.
Okay, so the change to the law that limits that excludes, I should say, consenting partners of the same sex.
No, it excludes all consenting partners in private.
Okay.
All.
Well, that was part of the clarification that I
Yeah.
saw. That and the part about being in private, what does that do to the law?
You can't have sexual relations in public. As far as I'm concerned, that's a matter of an indecency charge. So therefore, what is protective is all sexual conduct between all consenting adults in private. And we think that that is a fair amendment to the law.
In terms of the way forward, obviously it's up to the government, and I don't think we've heard from them as to what their plans are, but it would seem from the optics of this case that it's your client versus the churches, because the churches have been far more vocal about this.
No, I don't think Mr. Orozco has ever been against the churches.
No,
Maybe he
I'm not saying that he personally. I'm saying that the optics of the case, because the government has largely stayed out of the public eye, as is their want, is that it seems a showdown between your client and the churches. I'm saying not in terms of the actual arguments, just the optics of the case, because the government is silent.
So let me help you with the optics. While the case was going on, we had the fortunate opportunity to speak to representatives from the Methodist Church, the head of the Evangelical Association, Pastor Logsworth, as well Representative Canon Flowers. And we tried to explain what the issues were around discrimination and violence. And Pastor Logsworth was kind enough to say that the church's responsibility was to respond to a concern with compassion and love. With regards to that, he was kind enough to share that he do not share the extremism of his counterparts. And so what we're discussing, the opposition that we're discussing, is not the opposition of the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church, but we're discussing extreme right-wing evangelicals who believe that our Constitution is worth less than the Bible. In a society where the Bible is the top governing document and that ignores the diversity of our people, we have a fundamental problem. And so the challenge today is to engage those persons to understand that the Constitution is not the enemy, but the Constitution is here to support all of us in our freedom to believe, to express ourselves as citizens.
I think just to follow up on Caleb said, and I think the question that you're asking is, what is the role of the interested parties, namely the churches, in relation to moving forward? The interested parties, including the church, were just that. They were interested parties in the case, and they were allowed by the court to give their views. Subsequently, either side has a certain amount of time to appeal. That would be the claimant or the Attorney General. Those are the parties in the cases. All other persons were interested parties who could, according to the court, give their views.
In addition, I believe if the Prime Minister himself has said that the state will not shirk its responsibility in its September 2013 speech, I believe it's time for him to express the substance of that speech in how the state responds to the government's approach to this case at the next level of the judiciary. I also believe that the government supported the gender policy and the ideals of ensuring that all citizens' issues are addressed and that their primary focus is the development of its citizens, and in that regard, it's now in the government's hand to then respond in a constructive and responsible way that gives life to the ideals of the judgment that have been given today.
What is it that you're asking of the state?
I'm not sure if I understand. What is it that what
The
we're
response
asking?
that you're expecting from the state, can you clarify what is it that you would like to see done?
Very simple. If the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, which has supported gender policy, and the Prime Minister in particular, was serious about the state not shirking its responsibility, that it would not seek to appeal this judgment, and that it would open itself up to understand better the issues that affect its LGBT citizens in a very constructive and responsible way.
There's one thing, sorry Tommy, there was one thing in the judgment that was very interesting, and we're hoping to get the written judgment before the week is out. I'm pressing very hard to get it by tomorrow. I'm told today is out of the question. But one of the things that the Chief Justice said that was very important is that the preamble to the Constitution has meaning, and it must be expressed through our laws, and that the reference there to belief in God, the words God and the Creator, although they refer in his mind to Christianity, it does not mean that Christian morals and principles govern this country in order to make it a theocracy. His ruling was that what it means is that the state could not express itself to be an atheistic state. Obviously, it is founded on some Christian principles, and it is those principles that create the grounding for natural law and for human rights. But that also, along with our international and national obligations, is what gives us the underpinning for our rights. So one of the most cutting edge things to come out of this, and it may have escaped some, is the interpretation in section 16.3 of the word sex. When you're talking about discrimination, you are no longer allowed to discriminate against anyone on the basis of their sexual orientation. The Chief Justice actually expressed in his decision the view that sex also meant sexual orientation. So that is extremely far-reaching, and it will affect, I think, most naturally the transgender community in Belize. So you probably will look forward to more challenges coming up in the future.
I'm glad you raised that, because that would have been one of my questions also.
Yes.
If you can elaborate on that convention and Belize acceding to that convention.
Yes.
And the implications it had for the
You know, as a senator, I used to sit there and question whenever we were signing a treaty or a convention, because it has to pass through the Senate. And why did I question? I question because every time Belize signs any of those conventions or treaties, it raises obligations. It's not just a piece of paper. So, for instance, we were the first to sign on to the Status of Children, the Convention on the Status of Children. That meant that we had to honor each and every one of the obligations. The same with the UN Charter. That UN Charter is very specific, and the view has been expressed, as is in the Chief Justice's decision, that whenever you speak about sex, sex has to include not just your gender or your birth gender, it also has to include your sexual orientation. And so this is a very far-reaching, wide-ranging section that I think will give rise to a lot of interesting questions being asked in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Just to add one thing to that, I think it's in terms of, I think the question as well is about the role of international law in the way in which our laws are interpreted, as well as the Constitution. And so the Chief Justice indicated, which is consistent with other jurisdictions and laws, is that international law can be used by the courts to help interpret the state's obligations and what our laws mean. One rule that the court has is that if there are two meanings, the court will adopt the meaning which is consistent with the state's international obligations, because they presume the state not to want to breach its international obligations. So that's one of the things that the court did in using those international treaties to help with that interpretation of what sex includes. It's that Belize has signed up to these international agreements, and so when he is interpreting the Constitution as well as other law, he will interpret it in a way that is consistent with the state's international obligations.
There is a widely held notion among members of the church that this particular ruling is essentially the gateway for the LGBTIQ community to proceed with pushing an agenda to get to where the same-sex marriage is the next on the list of things, so to speak. Can you speak to us as to whether that is so, or where do you stand in terms of the way forward from this decision?
If my community was to fight for gay marriage, we now know that they have every right to go to court and litigate the issue. My organizations are concerned with socioeconomic, civil, and political rights issue of the community. One of the things you learn is that there is very little sense of accountability when you go to immigration, and they will mistreat you as a transgender person. So for us, the priority is a redress mechanism where immigration line officers must be more respectful toward people when they arrive at the airport and when they're applying for the immigration status. That's one. The second thing is, there is a simple matter of you're living with your partner and the health system will treat you as if you're a pariah because, well, you're not blood and you're not allowed to make life or death decision of the person you're living with. I don't think our people deserve to be treated with the indignity of being shut out of the health concerns of their partner. That is unacceptable. When it comes to employment, our people have a basic aspiration to work eat, a shelter just like everybody else. And in that regard, they must have the protection like every other citizen. It is unacceptable for me to be renting a house and then have my landlord tell me I need to leave because the roof need to fix, and then later find out that he never liked the person I was living with. The landlord has no right to tell me who I should or shouldn't sleep with. The only basis the landlord should have concern with is whether I'm paying him or her my monthly rent in time. These are the unjust things which have occurred over time. With regards to hate speech and crime, I've gotten my teeth knocked out. I've gotten my head was missed with a pipe battle with my next door neighbor. And all the court could tell me with that pipe battle missing my head was that I was not a victim. She could not acknowledge that there was hate in the act. There was no legal definition of hate. And while she found that person $200 for the crime of, I believe, threatening words and throwing a missile, the law does not acknowledge the fact that there are bias-motivated crimes that occur in this damn country, and as such, the law does not acknowledge that my right to personal security is of value, and that the state has a responsibility to protect it. I shouldn't have to go to the police department, quarrel with them about laying a charge, calling them up, and then asking the charges leave. Wait 9 months for them to send me a summons 4 times, and then learn later that the prosecutor had my file 30 minutes before my case. That is unacceptable when it comes to the issue of access to justice, not only for LGBT persons, but for all citizens. It is unacceptable to have a beating or a shooting, and then there is no redress for everyday citizens to get some help to hold the system accountable for their abuse of authority. Our work begs the point. We must invest in our redress mechanisms for our citizens. It's a matter of quality of life and dignity. And that, to me, is the focus and priorities on which we have established in our policy and advocacy work.
Speaking of your right to personal security, I know that this entire issue has been rather controversial from the beginning, in the sense that it divides the society. Those who are pro LGBTIQ community and those who are, in a sense, against what the community stands for. From a personal perspective, do you feel that you will be targeted more so now because the ruling is in your favor as they came on? Or where do you stand on that?
My security issues will never go away because I am the face, for the lack of a better word, this will never make it on news. I'm the face of bitch that battled to challenge the status quo in this society and managed to get a response that was meaningful. Nobody likes somebody to challenge status quo. In fact, it thinks that insecure bring fears and misunderstanding. And in their society, violence is used as a social mechanism to put you in your place. There will always be one crazy cow, one vindictive person who will use me as a scapegoat and take
what it does and says in real action. So for me, this fear that the sky is going to fall in, I'm sorry, is a view. I hear it, but I don't share it.
Going back to the evangelicals, and I don't pretend to beat the bush for them or anything like that, but it was interesting to hear Patrick Menzies make the suggestion that that anal sex and other forms of intercourse were already decriminalized, his words, by Section 46 of the Criminal Code, and he's referring to the raft of legislations. I understand. But that was the suggestion he made, and I'm asking, not in terms of the actual raft of legislation that was passed, but how does the amended section 53 complement that
A little learning is a dangerous thing. You assume that what he says about 46 is correct. I don't share it.
I don't
So
assume.
let us
I'm
not
asking, which is why I'm asking.
No,
which is
but-
why I'm asking. I don't assume.
The brief answer to that is his argument is utterly and completely without merit. Let's leave it there.
We take the last few questions. Anyone else?
I wanted to ask some clarification in terms of the criminal cases that have been brought or arrests that have been made under Section 23. Could you elaborate on
Section 23?
Sorry, 53.
Yeah, those won't change. They won't change.
No, I'm talking about, there was reference to a report from Nicole Hill
Right.
and some statistics that were presented. So I just wanted to ask you to elaborate on those specific cases brought or
It was a statistical
brought in
study.
under
It
Section
wasn't, she
53.
wasn't looking at specific cases. What she was doing was to make a case study of people who had been arrested, convicted, etc. So she was not making a commentary on specific cases per se. What it was a response to the state saying, don't bother with that law, nobody's arrested under it anyway. Nicole's evidence was people had not only been arrested, they had been convicted. So that there was support for the view that there is real basis for the concern by Mr. Orozco that he could be arrested by the state at any time. And this is something that the Chief Justice not only pointed out in his judgment, he said that there was a real fear, and that's why he found that Mr. Orozco had loco standi or standing to bring the case, even though he had never personally been arrested or been threatened with arrest.
So I think I would just pass on to the president of UNIBAM. Before, I would just like to make a statement that was sent to by us by Mrs. Kim Simplice Barrow, who's the Special Envoy for Women and Children, and where she said it was a great day for Belize. It's a great day for human rights. One step closer to dignity and the respect we all deserve. There's a final question. Yes?
It's hard for, I guess, for us because we are on the outside to picture, to put a face apart from Caleb, who you see very regularly doing his advocacy work as a representative of the LGBTIQ community. But how widespread is this community? Because it seems like a very silent number.
Behind you.
But I think to answer your question, I'll just let the president of UNIBAM answer that question.
I like the question, Daniel, and an entire community. I remember the days when many of the men of the community who identify as gay men were clamoring and to Caleb, who was at the time the executive president of UNIBAM, about the inhumane way of how they were being treated by the people who are there to protect us in the form of the police, and what to do. And so it was a great relief, one would say, with Caleb going out there looking as to how best to assist the community, and then an organization or a group of people who call themselves Europe, and Westman James is a part of that team, who came and assisted Caleb, did the research and things like that. And with that as the case, moved on day in, day out. There were members of the community. We don't have to be out there, Daniel, but people of the community who got people like Kelvin Ramnares, who created a page to assist UNIBAM and Caleb in bringing this challenge, who got people to come in, everyday people that we consider heterosexual, people from in certain places of government and things like that, to assist with the with the challenge. And to all those people, I would like to say, on behalf of the community, thank you, and thank you for all that have been done. And with that, there are other organizations like PETAL, Our Circle, and people who continue to help in this and who are out there. A lot of people, we wanted to be out there, but you know, you got to be making that dollar. A lot of people had to work and things like that. And for those of us who came out, it was a great victory, something to celebrate. So yeah, thanks.
I wanted to add that we face a chicken and egg situation with people. The first line of supportive rights is the family. First line of oppression is also the family. When people have to jump into a swamp just before their father pulls out a gun and to shoot after them, it lets you know that there are lots of people who don't have family support and who will remain invisible. I've been lucky because it's my mom, my sister, my entire family who has been behind me 100%. Even when I ran out of money, they were paying my light bill, my water bill, and keep me going. With that said, you will always see a small core group of people driving the movement forward because they can afford to socially. The large majority has to come to some mental maturity that they will stand up for themselves, or they will work behind the scenes to support the movement. But for the most part, what you see are people who have gone through a life process of not being afraid anymore to be themselves. And that to me is a fundamental part of why you'll see so few people speaking up and speaking loudly to media.
If I may, we're accompanied by Laura Longsworth from National AIDS Commission. We also have Erica Castellanos from CNET, Marta Angelica Carrillo. We also have Joan Burke. These are all people who have been heroes of the struggle in one way or another. Joan, we couldn't have done without your assistance. You were cited in the Chief Justice's decision. Thank you. We couldn't have done it without that huge team of people, Danielle. And in every struggle, you have the activists and the people who are vocal. Just remember that that is the tip of the iceberg. And when it comes to the LGBT community in Belize, it's an iceberg. Make no mistake.
Let us not forget Kendall, who was also mentioned in the application.
Yes.
And I think it was not only Caleb, but at the start of this case, it was Caleb as well as the organization
Yes.
Unifam. Unfortunately, the judge at the first instance before the Chief Justice had said that Unifam could not be a party, but rather and was allowed as an interested party. But that is to recognize that it was not just Caleb, but it was a group of persons who needed equality in Belize. And as a result of this case, there have been more, as been highlighted, other groups and organizations which have formed to push the movement forward. So, as I said, I agree and I congratulate all of those organizations.
One person who isn't here, and I have to mention her, Imani Fairweather Morrissey. Without Imani, there's not a lot of things we could have done. Her support and the support of the Oak Foundation were absolutely seminal. So we can't leave without saying thanks to Imani.
So thank you very much for coming out, and we'll be available. In press kit, you will see that there's some information about the case as well. There will be also there's also the expert reports of Chris Breyer referred to by the Chief Justice in his decision, as well as any other information that you may need. So thank you very much.
Thank you.